deal with the issue, whether it be on a professional level, on a personal level. I think we've all dealt with this in our families at some point or another.
Yes.
And it is an issue for everyone, and unfortunately it's becoming a bigger issue.
Absolutely.
As time goes on.
So today we're going to have a special guest, Tom Mollahan. He's the chairperson for Gallia Citizens for Prevention and Recovery. And I hear he has a bunch of other titles as well, but we'll kind of stick to that for today. So really thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for asking me.
Can you explain what Citizens for Prevention and Recovery is?
Gallia CPR, Citizens for Prevention and Recovery, is a coalition of individuals, of people in the community, as well as organizations and agencies in our community in Gallia County that are committed to assisting people caught up in addiction and drug abuse, and assisting them to paths of recovery. And also it serves as a process, or as a catalyst rather, for preventing families, individuals from choosing to go down those particular paths that lead to addiction, drug abuse, and drug addiction. So it's a pooling together of passion, of energy, of resources, of commitment to people who have real needs in that way. And it's been a great collaborative, a great cooperation among the different agencies, different people. And so it's been a joy to be able to work with such wonderful people who are so gifted and also committed to the cause of helping people out of addiction.
Okay. So this coalition, who makes up this coalition?
The coalition, we do have a lot of individual people who represent simply their families. Their lives have been touched by addiction, have been deeply impacted by it one way or another. And then also a number of agencies are participating, in fact are very much committed to it, and host and sponsor various aspects of things. Of course, I'm at Winghaven Counseling Services as one thing. A number of Woodland Centers is strongly represented. Health Recovery Services, Holzer Medical Systems, Task, and Spectrum, and the Field of Hope, and both our Common Police Court and as well as our Municipal Court have strong representation, as well as our Prosecutor's Office, the Sheriff's Office, and I know I'm forgetting people, and I hope they forgive me in advance. But a lot of people who participate, and I'm glad to say too that a lot of faith agencies and churches and so forth are participating as well. So it's been a great cooperation, and yeah.
Wonderful. So it sounds like a really well-rounded representation of the community here.
I think so. I think it's been phenomenal, in fact, and I'm grateful because everybody who comes bringing something, and it makes our discussion well-rounded. And then because it isn't just discussion, it's actually doing stuff. It's doing things. It's planning and then implementing things that make a difference in our community, from town hall meetings to fundraising events that help us then produce literature or something that we can put back out into the community and increase awareness in regard to the services that are available to them, but also to help create a general sense of awareness that I think fosters prevention in the first place, which, if we can, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, you know.
Yeah.
So we've been very blessed with the kind of participation we've had. So
go ahead.
No, have you found that the community has been, it sounds like the community has been very welcoming, not only on the different organizations that are part of this and that are all a factor in treating addiction and dealing with addiction in one way or another, but are you finding that a lot of families and a lot of individuals, not on a business level, that are coming into this and wanting answers and trying to find the appropriate resources for their loved ones?
Yeah, I think you hit it very well, because I think when a family has been impacted as they are by addiction as profoundly and as deeply and relentlessly as they are, that it creates a vacuum. What do? I don't know what to think. I don't know how to handle this, and people become, that's a kind of desperation. And people need to know that not only are they not alone, but that there are real things that can happen that would help them and then help their loved one. to overcome addiction, and it can be tough. Some of those things that we learn we need to do to address addiction in our families and in our homes. It's tough, and we need support. We need to know that that I'm doing the right thing because my instincts say do something different, and we need to be able to hear what other people are going through, and to know that that there is a right way to go about this, and even though it's hard, there are people who understand, who get it, who've gone through it, and I can benefit from their wisdom, their experience as well. So there have been a lot of individuals, a lot of families who either directly or indirectly, I think, benefited from things that have come out of some of the initiatives that CPR has brought. So, and one of the things it does bring is just that general awareness that there are people who specialize, and you're examples of that, people who know what it does to families and know what to do when they find themselves in that particular crisis. The coalition's been a great catalyst for not only discussion but for real proactive things to take place.
So what are some of the initiatives that Gaia Citizens for Prevention and Recovery have been involved in?
The coalition has sponsored town hall meetings like I've talked about, where there have been an opportunity for families and individuals to actually talk with professionals about addiction, about a loved one. I've got a cousin, I've got a husband, I've got a sibling, I've got a child who are caught up in this, and to be able to talk with people who know the answers, because there's so much rumor, there's so much gossip going on, and a lot of it's just misinformation. So that has been a tremendous benefit.
A lot of stigma attached.
A lot of stigma, and that and for people dealing with recovery, that's a cross that they often tend to bear alone, or think that they have to, because people don't understand, they'll be judged and so forth, and it's so hard to carry that. There have been initiatives, for instance, and we're hoping that we can bring this back again, something called Operation Street Smart.
Yeah.
And law enforcement professionals who deal with drugs, and especially drugs in as much as they tend to target our young people, and how those things can be hidden. That was brought to Gallia County before, and again, we hope to do it again relatively soon. It is an informative, hands-on kind of opportunity for people to know what to look for, and to empower people. Not only in the addiction aspect of it, but also how to get ahead of the curve. How do I keep my child, safe? How can I help him or her to not get caught up in that? The best way to defeat a lie is to bring truth, and if I can help my child, my spouse, my whatever, to know what the reality is in regard to addiction before they get there, then hopefully I'm giving them enough information to make better choices before they find themselves trapped and unable to get out again. Sure. So those are a couple of examples.
And just to kind of link people to Operation Street Smart, you can search on Facebook. They have a Facebook page. I'm sure you can get in contact with them, or just follow them and get information. It's a really helpful resource. So how would someone link with Gaia CPR group?
The coalition meets every second Monday of the month at the French 500 room. The Holzer Medical System has been very kind in offering space to the coalition partners, and even actually provides a lunch too. So you have to RSVP for the lunch. So if you plan on coming, you need to let me know beforehand. But people can come and be a part of that conversation. We recently had in our last coalition meeting, we had a representative, Angie Williamson, who represented the Gallia Board for Developmental Disabilities, and she brought the statistics from our county in regard to how drug and opiate addiction has been impacting families in regard to child developmental issues, and it's been staggering. It's an opportunity to become informed, to learn, and then also to motivate and empower us to make good decisions as a community, because we represent the community, and we have resources and opportunities to connect with people and to connect other people in ways that help real changes begin to take place, because battling addiction in a community is all about ultimately a culture change, and and behind a culture change there has to be a mindset change individually, and that's a collective change that begins to affect the culture. So we're kind of, that's really our goal. We're trying to change the culture, and it gives us a chance to know what we're talking about, become educated, informed, and then use that knowledge in meaningful ways. It doesn't do us any good if we know things, we don't do anything with it, or become discouraged by it and defeated by it. So we come together with the intent of using it in proactive, empowered ways.
Wonderful.
So,
Are you finding that by making this information available to the public and trying to include the public in making these changes happen, that you are, like we had talked earlier about the stigma of this, I still, I've been amazed actually from the people that I have heard think that it gets too much attention. You know, we just, you know, it's embarrassing people when we talk about it, instead of trying to understand that we're trying to educate the general population to make these changes. Do you find that there's still is a lot of the stigma that you deal with?
I think that I think there is a genuine stigma attached to it, and I think that part of that is motivated by fear. A lot of people that I encounter don't want there to be a problem, and it's actually a kind of a denial, really.
Stick your head in the sand.
Yeah, you know, and it'll go away. Well, it doesn't go away. In fact, it's escalated, and I'm not putting blame on anyone. It's just that the reality is that's what it is, and the only way that I believe, and I think a number of people believe, that can be challenged is by addressing it and by basically hitting it full force, head on, and we acknowledge this is the reality, but not just to camp, you know, how bad it is. That's not the intent.
No.
You know, I think if that were what we did, if that's what we did rather, we would be in a mess. But I think what we're trying to do is to connect people to the resources, to connect people to a hopeful position. One of the surest ways that addiction can defeat a person is by entrapping them in a sense of despair. But if we can help people to see that there are real reasons to have hope, that then they're motivated to fight the fight and to come together, to work together and connect with those things that will actually help them and empower them and equip them to fight that fight.
It takes away that isolation factor that they feel,
yes.
that they feel they're alone, that they're the only ones going through that. And I think, you know, as you stated, with and by including the families, it links them with those resources that they, you know, and talking to people that have went through it before. There's, you know, you can read about something, but when you talk face to face and sit down with someone that's actually lived what you're going through, it makes a world of difference.
It does.
And it gives you some hope that, you know, there's a positive end to it.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we've been talking with Tom Mollahan, chairperson for Gallia Citizens for Prevention and Recovery. It's a coalition effort here in Gallia County, and I know in Meigs County there's also a type of coalition that's been formed for probably a couple of years now. So they're looking for people in the community to join. In Jackson County, also just recently formed Spark. It's a coalition in Jackson County. And we will come back and talk with Tom Mollahan right after this. Welcome back to Choosing Recovery. We're here with Tom Mollahan, chairperson for Gallia Citizens for Prevention and Recovery. We've really got a lot of good resources so far. Tom, how are families in our area affected by drug and alcohol use?
Families, of course, are very complex in of themselves, and so the addiction issue is impacting them in a lot of complex kinds of ways. I mean, some of the obvious ways include the economic impact that it has on a family. For instance, you know, just the maintaining of a drug habit is crippling to most family incomes, and so that in of itself. But the greater loss always in a family is when whether through an overdose, a literal overdose death, and the loss of that loved one through that process, or the loss of that loved one just because of the preoccupation that addiction creates for the addict. The loss of loved ones to family has been probably the greatest tragedy. And you know, the loss of a parent because they're busy maintaining the drug habit. The loss of a child because they overdosed and they didn't get Narcan in time. Those are those are devastating things. And of course, I had already mentioned the issues in regard to how addiction and substance abuse can affect children in the womb and so forth, and their developmental capabilities later in life. So, I mean, it's such a complex thing. And then I think we've been inferring that what it often will do with a family is isolate not only the individual members of the family from one another, but isolate the family unit from other things, other entities, you know, and because they're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid of it being known. They don't go to church anymore. They're afraid to even be seen in the store. Or if they do talk with people, it's very formal, it's very, you know, it's very masked. And it's very difficult and dangerous to be real.
And I think in our culture, sometimes we think guilty by association. So I
Right.
can see that being a factor with families struggling with addiction.
Right.
While parents are afraid to go to church and go to the grocery store because their son or daughter's an addict, and they think, well, I did something wrong raising them. And that's not the case.
That's exactly right. And it's a natural thing for a parent when their child, whatever age that child might be, whether a child or an adult child, when that child makes a decision that is either morally wrong or, you know, detrimental to their health or is associated with a stigma like addiction and so forth, what did I do wrong? You know, all the self-doubt, all the reproach that kind of goes with that, and the shame, the humiliation, the fear of being rejected and judged, that's a real thing. And because that family then becomes isolated in regard to that, regular normal things that may help the family to be a healthy family and the individual members to be healthy people are not taking place. And so they're actually, it's almost as if they're cutting off, you know, social sources of nourishment for themselves because of the addiction issue. So it impacts them in a very broad sense, and it's real. It's a real impact. It does real damage, and it becomes generational often too. And we're seeing this happen. I mean, children, but adults, grandparents who maybe are raising their grandchildren, or sometimes the grandparents are the addicts. You know, that's a real thing too. So it's a dangerous thing.
And I think that's a very challenging thing too that you see is you're dealing with a child who you're trying to reach and teach, you know, to make better choices and to do other things, and that's all they're seeing at home. And
Exactly.
it's
That's
very
normal.
It's normal for them, and it's very frustrating because they don't know any different if they're brought up in that culture, and that's what happens at home. That's what they think is normal.
Right.
Are there any resources, or is there anything they include, like with teachers and things, to reach these kids young and unidentify these things?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we have, as another member of the coalition that I failed to mention earlier, we have the Gallia County Local School Systems. They've been very actively a part. Some of their administrators and principals and so on have been just great allies and very deeply embedded in some of the things that are taking place. One of the things that happened recently, and I thought this was very encouraging, was that at the university here, they had a special forum for their senior class. And they had reached out to the coalition, and we were able to suggest a couple of people to serve on the board, or panel rather. And they were able to participate in that. And the reason I was particularly encouraged in regard to this is that teachers are frontliners in regard to this. Helping our graduating education students to understand the problem before they get in the field, so to speak, is going to be very strategically important. Helping them to recognize, I mean, you know, a child who isn't getting enough sleep because their parents, their whole cycle is off, you know, they're people at the house, you know, they were doing a drug deal, or they witnessed a parent overdosing, you know, the trauma of that, I mean, it impacts their ability to learn. And so teachers who understand that that's happening can then, I think, more intuitively help those students that they're encountering, and they recognize as having to go through these things. They can more proactively engage them in the educational way and teach them effectively and help them to just, you know, sometimes the safest place for a child is either church or school because home is so
Volatile.
chaotic, exactly. So, education has been, I think, a very important part. And then informally, I think churches too sometimes play a frontline role too, where they're Sunday school teachers or just parents who allow their children to go to church. Someone will come and pick those kids up, and they'll recognize something's going on here. The child's not been fed, for example, and we feed them and so on. Well, why is this happening? You know, and then they can help that child to have a more stable existence, and then sometimes help the family. Sometimes I know some pastors who've been very deeply involved with families struggling with addiction, and they've been able to help them to connect with the resources that they needed to help them address the addiction issue.
So, say a family comes to you and someone in their family is struggling with addiction. What would you tell them to do? What resources are there?
I think I would try to understand the dynamics at work. I would try to understand whether or not the person addicted was open, first of all, because that would actually shape some of the things that would come after. For instance, if the person addicted was open to help, then of course there are various kinds of treatment that they could pursue. There's outpatient treatment, but more often than not, actually residential treatment programs are sometimes the best option for some of those situations. So we could recommend connecting to those kinds of things. But when a family finds that the addict is not yet ready to begin to make those changes, they're not open to that, still the family needs support, and they need to know how to approach that. And I would say a couple of things. First of all, you need to there are recovery groups, there are support groups for family members with addicts in their lives. Being a part of a church family, you know, and I understand, you know, not wanting to share and not, you know, with people at church, that kind of thing, but as a pastor, I know that one of the goals that I would have is to help be a proactive, safe place for people to share their burdens, their problems, whatever they were, and that would include, of course, addiction. So I would say you need to be connected. I would try to help them to be connected to those kinds of things. If the person were open to recovery, then I would say there are certain things available to them. There are medication-assisted treatment programs, MATs. I don't know that I feel good about all of them. I'm not a big fan of Suboxone, I'll just say it.
Not either.
But there are some other possibilities, like Vivitrol or something like that. Those kinds of things. And then we have some wonderful agencies who work very hard, and they're very knowledgeable and very skilled at what they do. And
so how would families find a local support group?
Most of the agencies maintain lists of those support groups, and actually the agencies will often share them amongst themselves too, I'm glad to say. So like Narcanon or Al-Anon or something like that, those exist. There are some that don't bear that title that exist in churches that work that way. So the agencies usually maintain those kinds of things. The health department, I think, maintains a list. Woolens, I know, will share that information as well. So there are a number of ways to get that information. And of course, if we were contacted, I would share that information as well. So.
And I think the frustrating part too for a lot of people is when you get someone that's to the point of where they're ready to accept treatment and they're ready to go in. Unfortunately, it's difficult finding an open spot because this problem is so huge. And then they'll be like, you know, well, what am I supposed to do now?
Right.
So it's nice to have several different resources.
Right. And the residential treatment program, that is such a big deal. And then those, even when you can find a place, sometimes they don't take, you know, your insurance or something like that, and you can't afford it. You know, what can you do in the meantime? In the meantime, I would say you need to get connected to at least the aggressive intensive outpatient programs, and we do have some right in our own county. So. There are options to kind of get that ball rolling.
Yeah, and I think the key is for families, and I hear this all the time in the office. You'll have a mother come in or a wife or a whoever, and they're like, "What can I do to make them quit?" And you try to explain to them that they are not going to be open to treatment. They're not going to be successful in treatment until they come to that place on their own, and they know that they've hit their rock bottom, whatever that is, and they're ready to make that choice to quit and to get into the right program and to go through those steps, because it's not easy. There's reasons all these people are addicted. You know?
You can't make them.
No, you can't make them. I do want to just mention, I know we don't have much time, but I want to mention that the Common Pleas Court and Municipal Court both run specialized dockets, drug court dockets, and they're approved by the State Supreme Court, and they work the judicial system and law enforcement want people to get the treatment they need. They're not out to just bully people and to terrorize advise them, that kind of thing. They want them to get better.
Their job is going to be much easier if they don't deal with all of the effects of,
That's right.
of addiction.
That's
and
right. Yeah.
So we do only have a little bit of time left. What's a couple key elements that families need to know about addiction?
I think that in regard to addiction, don't get caught up in the self-blame game. You know, this is all my fault, this kind of thing, and and I'm the reason that they're addicted, that kind of thing. I think that's a dangerous mentality. Even when we've made choices that may have somehow been a part of that, still the way to move forward is to look forward and to capitalize on the wisdom we've gained from the past and not to make the same mistakes, but at the same time to move forward and to be hopeful. And hope, I think, is the central ingredient there. And as a pastor, for me, spiritually, it's faith in Jesus, you know. And when I can, I share that. But ultimately, it's hope. We need to share hope. So.
Yeah, and I think that people, once they get out in the community and be connected with others, they realize, hey, I'm not alone. Because I don't know a family that's not affected by drug or alcohol use. So thank you so much, Tom,
welcome.
for
Thank
coming
you.
to join us today. We
grateful.
had such a good time and learned a lot. So see you next time.